not before we've heard from Deirdre Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, here we are once again creating legislation to replicate legislation that the dastardly EU has imposed upon us. That EU legislation that is so oppressive, we have to pass the same legislation to free ourselves of the tyranny of EU red tape, taking back control to change nothing. I do think, though, however, we should take a moment to consider the imports of products that the agricultural industries use and how logjam at entry points can and may well affect that, no matter how many lorries park on old airfields. The UK imports about 70% of fertilisers, very little potash, but half of the ammonium nitrate and all of the phosphorus used. You can't go stockpiling it because there isn't any significant additional capacity, and ammonium nitrate in particular needs storage that minimises the risk of explosion. So the lorries need to keep running and the ports need to keep functioning and the imports need to be frictionless, or there will be little in the way of harvest bounties. And that's before we get to the imported seed and plant protection products and the animal feed. So if the ports get choked with border checks and UK red tape, it won't matter what these regulations say. Food production on these islands will suffer. Now, I welcome the 2-year transitional period, but I can see no reason why the acceptance that the EU regulations work can't be extended indefinitely. Let the fertilisers be sold as they are now, and the plant protection products and seeds and the animal feed too. We trust the EU, don't we? Yes. I also welcome the requirement for ministers to get the approval of the devolved administrations before making regulations about fertilisers. That seems a very sensible way forward and a path that other departments could consider following. The various administrations offer wisdom that should be welcomed, and we trust the Scottish Government, don't we?
Yeah.
Now, I do have concerns about the regime to control the quality of the products available, particularly when I consider that ministers will face the temptation of reducing the tariffs on Russian products, and particularly ammonium nitrate. The anti-dumping duties that the EU imposes on Russian ammonium nitrate will disappear unless they are replicated by the regulations, and the implications that will have for the quality of imports is certainly worth considering carefully. That will be an issue that gets snarled up in any future trade negotiations, of course, both with the EU and with Russia. I'd like to believe that the government would ensure quality and would resist the temptation to cut tariffs and duties, but I would have liked to have believed there was actually a plan for Brexit negotiations, or at least some impact assessments that looked at what was actually happening, and I was certainly sorely let down on that. However, I would be grateful for the Minister's view on that in his response. Second question, it's just further to the suggestion the Minister made that, or the fact that he mentioned that more stringent regulations would now be applied to ammonium nitrate from the EU, in line with those currently applied to countries out with the EU, and I just wondered what added costs might result as a result of those extra regulations. But this is one of hundreds of statutory instruments that DEFRA, despite the best efforts, I am sure, of its civil servants, is lagging behind on. The National Audit Office report on DEFRA's readiness for Brexit was scathing in its assessment, to the point that I think we have to regard it as an impossible task for DEFRA to get ready. I wish there was a way of ensuring that the products that farmers need to produce food will get to them, but the sudden shutting off of the supplies that they need looks set to become a reality, whatever secondary legislation is passed here. A better decision by far would be to extend Article 50 and see whether things could be reconsidered. I'm tempted by the thought, the hopeful possibility that we could pass this legislation and guarantee supply, but I know that isn't realistic, and I have many concerns about the import regime to follow and the corralling of powers in ministers' hands. It is disappointing, to say the least, that this is the best that is on offer. Disappointing that a government that claims so much was possible is content with this. And I really hope that that failure does not come back to haunt us all.